Hi everyone, Mark here from Yala. Just coming to you today just to give you a few pointers on common CV mistakes. I suppose it's one thing that we see every day as recruiters, and I think it's nice, I suppose, just to kind of give back and kind of show everyone like what we look for and what we kind of expect as well, and what the client will expect as well when they're looking at CVs. The first key point, guys, is probably poor design and formatting. Okay, you really want to keep it simple. Simple is best. You want a very clear, concise structure in place in chronological order. A little brief description at the top about yourself with your details like your email and your name. And then what you want to do as well is have just a clear structure of the time you were in your current role till present, and then what you did in that job, and maybe some achievements you had in that job, and then replicate that for all your positions you've had. Now, obviously, that's completely dependent on how long you've been working in an industry. Maybe you don't have a huge amount of information that you can put into that, but that's still the best way to approach it. What we see a lot of is, when it comes to bad CVs, is things like people having boxes or kind of squeezing the information into boxes and not using the whole space of the page, which is terrible in two ways. One, it just doesn't look that great. It also limits the amount you can write. And secondly, as well, it means that your CV is going to be longer than it needs to be. Two, and one of the probably main ones as well, like 1 and 2 are very important, is your spelling and grammar. I mean, it's so easy just to run it through Word to make sure that it's obviously it reads well. Have a friend or a family member look over your CV, make sure that it sounds okay. I mean, you have to understand, like when we send CVs out, we obviously check them as well, but sometimes when we're busy, and especially when we don't see any sort of red markings on words, so we know that there's not an obvious spelling mistake, but then when you read it, it just doesn't read well. Sometimes we don't get the time to look at that. So what ends up happening is that it goes to the client, and the client does take the time, and they're like, this isn't reading well at all. So you have to be very sure that it is very easy to read and well put together. 3 is actually gaps in the CV. So look, it happens to everyone. Maybe people go traveling for a year and they come back, or they're out of work for a certain period of time. So they don't want to put anything in because they don't want to draw attention to it. But actually by not putting it in, you are drawing attention to the fact that there's a gap in your CV. And that just creates a huge red flag when it's looked at by recruiters, because we look for those things, and also by the client if it gets that far. And it can leave a real negative connotation attached to it, even if it's rectified after the fact. It sometimes can be too late, you know. So just make sure if you are traveling, or you had to go home for a period of time because one of your family members was ill, or for personal reasons or whatever, just put in the dates you were out, and just put in the reason why, you know, for personal reasons, or I was away traveling. All they want to see is that there's no gaps in the CV. They won't ask questions on the reasons why, if that makes sense. The fourth one would be, I suppose, images. We're seeing a lot more of that in actual CVs. They're normally in the PDF format, and they look very nice in the sense of like, wow, that's an impressive looking CV, in the sense of like, it looks very neat and tidy, but it doesn't really give much detail to the person's experience, you know. And I call them the kind of infograph CVs. So even when it comes to the hobbies, you can see someone might put in an image of a man running, or when it comes to their kind of technical abilities in certain software, they might say, oh, 4 stars out of 5 for this software. It could be things like AutoCAD or something like that. It's not really what the client is looking for. The client wants a lot more description put in, and that needs to be put in through words. So I would definitely push back a lot. Sometimes you might have seen that maybe recruiters already, when you send your CV, and are pushing back on that CV to say, look, can we make this a bit more easier to understand? And it's very hard as well when we're sending it to the client in our formatting. It's very hard for us to unformat that and put it into terms that they will understand. So just to be aware of that. If you feel that you're sending your CV out a lot and you're not getting any sort of traction from the marketplace, that could be one of the reasons. And 5 really is, look, it's something that maybe catch up with you later on, maybe when you might get to the interview process, but it's just being honest with your CV. Any industry in Ireland is a small industry. Within 2 degrees, everyone knows everyone, you know. So just be very careful that you're not putting in or something that you're not in your CV, you know, that if you're at a supervisor level, you're not saying you were a manager, you know, or if you didn't manage people or weren't a team lead, that you said you weren't, or don't say that you were, because it's very difficult if that comes up in conversation. You go down this rabbit hole of a lie, and it's very hard to pull yourself back out. And then of course, if they know anyone who might know you, and the client might ask them, oh, what do you know of John or David? And they're like, oh yeah, he's fine, yeah, he said he was a team lead. Really? That's not what I remember. Then we have a problem, you know. So just make sure you're honest, guys, okay? I'm sure everyone has things that they've done that they're proud of that they can put into achievements under each job that they've had. But definitely don't lie about positions you've had or even projects you've worked on, because if you go down that rabbit hole and they ask you about them, you're in a bad place and it's very hard to pull yourself out. I hope that proves useful to everyone. I mean, look, there are more than 5 tips that I could give when it comes to CV writing. These are just some of the very more common ones that we would see every day. Look, the main thing when it comes to CV writing is just, look, be clear, be legible, no errors, and easy to read. You have to understand is that, think of it from the client point of view, okay? They're looking at hundreds of CVs a week. Think of it from the agency point of view. We are looking at hundreds of CVs a week, okay? It has to be clear, it has to be easy to read. So as long as you remember those 2 key points, you shouldn't have any issues. And if you do have any issues or want to have a chat or want to send your CV in to have a look at, happy to send it in to myself at mark@yala.ie. Speak soon, all the best, bye.